This is Jesse Bernhardt. I play for the Chesapeake Bayhawks in the MLL, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
Tom Schreiber. Sidearm whip, scores!
Now in front, Pennell scores! Ball Rabel, splits two and scores!
Kylie O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Kelly, not shy, bounces one home! What a start!
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hunton, he's Adam, together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues. Stoked to have you guys for another episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. We are recapping the MLL Championship weekend, as well as some developing news on the future of the Rattlers franchise. A lot to talk about. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Just getting done another week of travel for work, so I'm excited to get in on some of these semifinal and championship games and talk about the MLL.
Yeah, it was a great weekend for lacrosse. If you kind of shut off your TV when the PLL ended, you missed some great games because we had a great weekend. All close. 2 were decided by 1 goal, and the other was decided by 2. So some phenomenal games. So let's just dive right into it, Adam. The Blaze got off to a hot start, pun intended. They were firing on all cylinders. Their guys like Brian Cole and Mark Matthews had some sick highlight goals, and they really got it going for this Blaze team and really had this Bayhawks team on their heels. So what did you see from this first half?
It was a really strong half by the squad, you know. And another guy that came up big was the Rookie of the Year, Alex Woodall. You know, he was able to win 9 of the first 15 face-offs in that semifinal game and came out big. So it was a really strong showing in the first half by a Blaze team that came out on fire. You know, they had Mark Matthews moving around, Randy Stotts. So the same people as usual were coming up big for the Atlanta Blaze offense. It just was that dreaded third quarter again for them. We've seen that throughout the year with them the last few games and for a lot of teams this year. That second half start is just what's downed a lot of squads.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was on. I'll be honest, I was nervous for the Bayhawks. Early on, I mean, they went into that second half down 9-4, and the Blaze really looked like they were going to just continue to pile it on. But again, that third quarter doomed them. The Bayhawks scored 6 goals to the Blazes 1. Yeah, so then it was 10-10 heading into the fourth quarter, and the Bayhawks ended up taking a 13-12 lead with less than 2 minutes left. Atlanta had another chance to tie it up, and Warren Jeffrey came up with a huge turnover. Dave Kyle called a timeout, and it looked like they were going to be able to ice the game, but that did not happen. Christian Mazzone came up with a huge turnover on the ride on Matt Abbott to recover the ball for the Blaze, and they end up putting one away with less than 30 seconds left in the game to tie it and send it to overtime. Kind of ironic, given that Matt Abbott in 2009 was the one that scored that Syracuse goal that sent them into overtime with Cornell in the NCAA Championship, and they would end up coming away with a victory. So we got some bonus lacrosse right out of the gate. And the savior of the day, though, was Steele Stanwick on a nasty low-to-low rip. He had a nice C-cut, caught it, ripped it low-to-low, put the game away for the Bayhawks, and they survived to advance to the championship. But a great game, valiant effort by the Blaze. And, we both talked about how we wouldn't have been surprised if the Blaze came away with the victory, and they nearly pulled it off. Disappointing for them to lose in their first playoff game, but, a valiant effort by the Atlanta squad.
And, we talked last week about the higher scoring it got. I felt like it was going to be advantage Blaze, but kudos to the Chesapeake offense for coming back. And it's just such a shame. We talked about it the last few weeks. I know we keep ragging on the defensive side of the ball for the Blaze, but they just weren't able to hold that lead going into the second half. And it just was their consistent Achilles heel all year was that the defensive side of the ball. The offense, I mean, you put the Bayhawks defense on the Blaze, and I think they're winning the championship with that high-powered offense that the ATL has. But they just weren't able to kind of overcome that third quarter and weren't able to win. But kudos for our friend Steele to come up big in the overtime period, and he came up big in the championship, as we'll talk about later.
Yeah, no, and I think, too, though, that you got to look at the offense a little bit, too. They were doing so well in those first 2 quarters, and to kind of lay an egg in that third quarter was huge, and they still got some good possessions, but I think you got to give credit to the Bayhawks defense for really locking them down. Again, like rookie Warren Jeffrey had a phenomenal game. He would have a great championship game as well. And I think, we said the magic number for them was 15 goals, and then they ended up needing, 14 to get that victory, and they just couldn't get it done. So unfortunate for them, but a phenomenal game for that first game. But then, we had another great game from the Cannons and the Outlaws following that. Cannons got off to a hot start as well. And, that seemed to be the story of the day, was teams getting off to a hot start but kind of failing to last down the stretch. And they're a team, that put together, a pretty consistent effort throughout the regular season. Zed Williams, Zeddy Ballgame, he had 4 goals and assists on the day, and he started off with an assist to Kyle Jackson. And they got off to a 5-1 run that eventually would lead to a 7-3 lead after one quarter. So this game, right out of the gate was high scoring. Second quarter, saw Boston maintain their lead. They traded goals with the Outlaws. They eventually went up 11-7. But that late rally by the Outlaws closed the gap to 12-10 with the quarter approaching its end. However, again, that momentum swing went back to the Cannons because Mark Hockerton put a goal away at the last second before halftime. So, they went into halftime still with the momentum and the lead 13-10, in a good spot. Obviously, not as big a lead as they went into after the first quarter, but they were sitting pretty good. And it was tight as ever going into halftime. 13 shots, 2 saves, 22 ground balls, and 11 for 23 face-off percentage for the Outlaws. To the Cannons, 14 shots, 3 saves, 24 ground balls, and 12 for 23 percentage. And then the second half got off to a bang with Zach Currier, who had a diving goal on the crease, but that was waved off on a controversial call that will actually come into play a little bit later as well, as we'll discuss. But I don't know. Did you see the play? I thought this was a bad call. Honestly, I think Currier had the right to be upset. He left his feet, scored the goal before he landed in the crease. I didn't see him, make contact with the goaltender before the ball crossed. I really didn't know what they were watching on this one, but they ended up waving that off. And then Cal Dirth, who had 4 goals in the day, gave the Cannons a 4-goal lead, and it looked like, the Cannons were going to run away with it. But they began to unravel, after Kyle Denoff and Kyle Jackson both went down with injuries. But it was a 4-goal run by Denver that got him back in this game, and none other than the GOAT himself, John Grant Jr.
He is just a human highlight reel, man. When you think a guy is just kind of not, he's just the absolute human highlight reel, man. At 44, to still be playing the way he did this weekend, he's the absolute GOAT. I think he could be playing 6 years down the road, put on the pads after being retired for a couple of years, and still be a fantastic player. Just look, if you saw some of the highlight goals from this one and the highlight passing, man, it was just unbelievable to watch. It's just been such a pleasure to watch him all season. After we weren't sure that we'd see him on the field again, we were kind of watching greatness this weekend, despite them losing the championship. He came up huge in the semifinal game.
Yeah, 44 years old. He had 3 goals in 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Including, some gorgeous behind-the-back shots, some crease dives. I mean, the man plays like he's 25 years old out there. We want to talk about Tom Brady being a guy who has really defied time. I mean, John Grant Jr. is doing it, in lacrosse, and he's not a guy that's just like, getting easy, like on the crease dunks. He's scoring in these most athletic ways possible at 44 years old. It's just unbelievable to watch, and, I think we're taking for granted the history that we're watching right now. He brought that Denver team back into this game, and they ended up tying it up 14-14. And they would trade goals to make it 15-15 before Chris Aslanian, who also had 4 goals and an assist on the day. And Zach Currier put 2 more in the net to give Outlaws a 17-15 lead in the eventual win. But yeah, John Grant Jr., his 5 goals that propelled this team to their 4th consecutive MLL Championship was the story. And, we had a great storyline going into this championship between him and Lyle. Really kind of the past and John Grant Jr., the veteran, versus a young guy like Lyle Thompson, who's really reaching his prime, set up a great matchup for us on Sunday.
Yeah, and before we move on to the championship, I have to say, to praise Nick Morocco. I mean, he stood on his head a good deal. I know the stats don't really show it. He gave up more goals than saves, 17 goals to 16 saves. But he had a fantastic year. I talked about in previous pods, like when we were going through the MLL awards, that I thought he should have been a finalist for the goalie of the year. He's a fantastic player, one of the best in the league, and I'm looking forward to watching him play going forward.
Yeah, no, and he was honored too with the Dave Huntley award, Man of the Year award, well deserving there. You know, I'm reading his book right now, Lacrosse the Globe, which is kind of touching on how we can really grow this game at a global level. And, you know, he's done a lot for the Boston community in terms of visiting cancer patients, the Boston Cans Foundation. So disappointing, you know, that they end up not getting that win, but well deserving too with the Dave Huntley Man of the Year award. But yeah, let's now dive into this championship game, Adam. Very controversial. We'll get to that kind of later, but this game was all Bayhawks at the start in the first quarter, and the Bayhawks kind of kept rolling in that second quarter. Went on a 3-1 run at one point and, you know, made it 8-3. So the Outlaws going into the half trailing 8-3, really backs against the wall. And they come out, and their defense has a dominant third quarter. Kudos to Dylan Ward, all-star goalie. He shut out the Chesapeake's offense. And then Max Adler, who was on our podcast recently, 11 for 22 faceoffs on the day, but he dominated that third quarter and really gave the Outlaws the opportunity to put away, you know, 2 goals and make it 8-5 leading into the fourth quarter. You know, still down, but they obviously closed that gap and were able to give themselves a chance to win. But what did you see from this third quarter that kind of got them back in this game?
Yeah, you mentioned it a little bit ago, but Max Adler's play was fantastic. And, you know, you would have thought the Bayhawks offense caught what the Blaze had in that third quarter woes, whatever they had, because the defense of the Outlaws, kudos to defensive coordinator Matt Bachlet, they were able to really stymie the Bayhawks offense, who was hot up to that point.
But yeah, no, and you know, who other than John Grant Jr. too to lead the scoring. He had a goal and 2 assists in the game, and Ryan Lee had a hat trick. A beautiful wraparound goal from John Grant Jr. And then everyone saw his flip pass that ended up making SportsCenter top 10, where he flicked it to Ryan Lee right on the crease. And then Denver ended up taking a 9-8 lead with 7:51 to play. And, you know, really looked like they were in the driver's seat. Bayhawks had no answer. They hadn't scored a goal in over a quarter, and it would take 5 minutes of scoreless lacrosse before they ended up getting a goal, going down 9-8, and it was Steele Stanwick's crease dive that was initially waved off, and then the refs, you know, called it a good goal. So this is where the controversy started to come into play, and, you know, I can understand Courier's frustration from the call on Friday night after seeing this, but I did think this was a good goal as well. You know, we talk about you're not supposed to make contact with the goalie, and Steele did make contact with the goalie prior to the ball crossing the line, but I don't think he initiated it. And the rule says you have to initiate it, and it was actually Dylan Ward who stepped towards him. So, you know, it's a ticky-tacky call. I mean, we talk about all day in the college game how the dive, you know, is a phenomenal play to watch, but so tricky to officiate. And it's really, really caused a lot of problems in both the college game and, you know, kind of the pro game. And so they ended up getting that controversial call and tying it up 9-9 late in the game. But that's not where the issue lies, and this is where we'll get into, you know, the Outlaws really took exception to not only this call, but later a missed timeout as well. But I think you got to look yourselves in the mirror, because that Steele Stanwick crease dive ended with a late hit on him and another sportsmanlike contact penalty called on Denver. So they go 2 men down with 2:15 left to play. You can't just take a penalty. You can't take 2 penalties and go 2 men down that late in the game, in a championship game. Like, that's on the Outlaws for that. I mean, I don't know. What did you feel, Adam?
Yeah, I think I might lean the other way from the goal standpoint. I would be mad if I was Zach Courier and the Outlaws. I think his hand might have been hit the crease before. I'm disagreeing with you when it comes to the goal side of things, but after the play, being a former goalie, like I'm always proud of a defensive player sticking up for his goalie, but this is not the time and place to be doing that. If we're in the first quarter of a regular season game, hey, you make sure that the other team knows that you don't mess with their goalie, but you can't take a penalty there that ties the game up and makes you go man down with this little amount of time in the fourth quarter of a championship game. That's just hotter heads taking over when they really needed to play it cool.
Yeah, no, because say what you will about the goal. I mean, the goal was, waved off initially, but that hit was way late. It was way late. So, I mean, like, that's where you got to look yourself in the mirror if you're the Outlaws players. Like, I get it. Like, they had a tough call, go against them here. It went against them the opposite way on Friday. I get they were the same crew. I understand that. Like, I sympathize with them on that. But look yourself in the mirror. You took 2 penalties with 2:15 left to play. Put your defense in a terrible spot, and they actually came up big. They actually held them for that whole minute to no goals. And, I say what you will, whether that goal should have counted or not, but, you gave the Bayhawks this chance, and so I think that's where it lies. But now we get into the real controversy. So they ended up, preventing any goals from being scored. They stifle that Bayhawks man-up offense, and they recover the ball with just a little over a minute to play. And it's, Eli Gobrecht who ends up scooping up the ground ball, and I counted. He had it for 3 seconds in his stick. Ended up losing it. Chesapeake regains possession. And this is where the controversy lies. The Outlaws coach, Tony Seaman, attempted to call a timeout during this time. It was not awarded to him. They were flipping out on the sidelines. And this is where I got to lean, with the Outlaws on this. So I get 3 seconds is not a lot. So, I don't think you can pin the game on this situation. But if you're an official, you have to know the coach wants a timeout. And they came out and said after the fact, Matt Bocklett said that they told them, if we get possession of the ball, we want to call a timeout. And as a ref, you know that, like, that's what you got to do. Like, you should see it right away. So I will say it was 3 seconds. That's not that much time, to have possession. But
it's 3 seconds long enough.
Yeah, 3 seconds long enough. I agree. So that, that did kind of rub me the wrong way. But, again, it's still 10-10. The Outlaws still haven't lost this game yet. I get, they would have had a chance to kind of win the game themselves outright, but haven't lost the game yet on defense. And after some quick passing, Chesapeake found rookie Andrew Q, who buried a time and room shot to give the Bayhawks the lead. And that's when everything began to unravel. Coach Seaman got after it, gave the officials an earful. Zach Courier was giving the officials an earful. He ends up getting ejected, and everything just starts to unravel for the Outlaws. And Bayhawks would run the clock out. They would earn their franchise's 6th title, the most in MLL history, with Steele Stanwick finishing 2 goals, 1 assist on the day, and being named player of the game. Phenomenal game that unfortunately was, marred by this, chain of events that, this controversial ending. And, I feel for Outlaws fans, but, again, you got to look yourself in the mirror. You didn't put yourself in the best spot. You wouldn't have won the game even if you had gotten that timeout. You don't know. Maybe they would have gone down and scored, but, it's not like they called off a goal that would have been the game winner. So that's where I just think, it's disappointing, but you can't overreact like they have.
Yeah, and it's tough. It kind of, just from the Twitter follow, it kind of reminded me of the Saints-Rams last year with that.
Absolutely.
With that blown pass interference call in the NFC Championship game. The Saints had a chance to win despite that afterwards, and so did the Outlaws. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for them. So I feel for them, like you said. I feel for the fans. It's a tough way to go out and tough way to end a championship. But kudos to the Bayhawks for winning it, and I'm excited to see what the offseason has to bring, which we'll talk about in a few.
Yep, absolutely. And, I think, like you said, with, like, the Saints thing, that's a good analogy because, in sports, we tend to pin it on one play. We need a scapegoat. Their scapegoat happened to be the refs not giving them a timeout. It's understandable. Again, I feel for them. But another thing that we're going to dive into now is this controversy actually lasted long after the game. There were reports from people that were at the game that said the fans were nasty to the refs, calling out like they were going to track them down. They were throwing trash and garbage at them. That's just not a good look for the sport. Luckily, that wasn't on the broadcast at all. But, if those reports are true, that's just not a good look for the sport. I get it. It was an Outlaws crowd there in Denver. But you have to have a cooler head if you're a fan. And, the Outlaws, they took to social media to, show their disappointment, and they have every right to do that. But this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit because, this was all about the MLL. This is all about the officials. This is about a championship game that had an unfortunate, controversial ending. And instead of celebrating the Bayhawks, what are we talking about again, Adam? We're talking about the PLL versus the MLL. And I cannot stress enough how sick and tired I am of hearing the debate from fans. Now, I get it. If you're the league or if you're a player, you have every right. If you're a player in the MLL and you're on the PLL now and, you've enjoyed what the PLL has brought you that you didn't have at the MLL, that's your right. You're allowed to say whatever you want. I know guys like Jake Bernhardt, like to poke fun at the MLL. He has every right to do that. He's a player. But the fans going at against each other and talking to these players, there were so many people that were saying, oh, join the PLL. Zach Currier confirmed to the PLL. Like, maybe he is going to the PLL. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure if I was Zach Currier after losing the championship game the way he did, I don't want to hear from people on Twitter about how I should go to the other league. I just lost a championship in the league that I play for. You don't want to hear that. And so I was really annoyed by that. That really got me. And another thing that people should, be aware of, I know I tweeted this out, the MLL and the PLL use the same refs. There's plenty of refs that reffed in the PLL that reffed in the MLL. I know the one guy we talked about was Brian Abbott. He reffed, in the PLL earlier in the season, and he reffed in the MLL Championship.
And he was a head crew chief, so, he's a professional ref. They have professional guys doing it. Some calls may have not gone the way that you had hoped, but they are professional and tenured refs. They're in, like you said, there's refs that were in both leagues. That's not the talking point that we wanted to get out of this. It's tough. I'm sure it's not what the MLO wanted,
Nope.
obviously.
Yeah.
So it's tough to see, and I know I don't know why fans can't. Iron sharpens iron, right? With the PLL coming in, both leagues got better this year in a variety of different ways, and you like the competition, but stop picking sides. I don't really get it.
No, yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there too, Adam, because you can take sides. Like, you can have a preference. We both have preferences on what league we prefer, and we like some stuff from the one league and we like some stuff from the other league. We're kind of pick and choosy in that regard. Like, if you're all in on the PLL, that's fine. Be positive about the PLL. Don't tear down the other league and the fans of the other league because you want to make yourself feel better. And I think you hit the nail on the head is iron sharpens iron. These leagues, the MLL did a way better job this year than it did last year because it had competition in the PLL. Competition is good, but what the problem is, this competition has degraded into more trash talking between the fans and divided the lacrosse community. That's not what it should be about. The players can go at each other. The leagues themselves can go at each other. That's their prerogative. I mean, they're competing leagues. They're competitors. They have every right to do that. I will never tell a player like what he can or can't say because that's not my place. But the fans, we just witnessed the greatest summer of professional lacrosse, and what we're talking about is which league is better rather than enjoying that we had twice as much lacrosse on. That's the big thing here that I think people need to realize. The last time we had 12 pro field lacrosse teams in one season? You know when that was? It was 2000 and never. We've never had 12 professional field lacrosse teams. And we have 5 women's teams, might we add it. It has been the greatest summer of professional lacrosse, and I think that's where I want to segue this conversation into is we need to appreciate that more. We need to talk about how great of a summer we had it as lacrosse fans. You might prefer one league over the other. That's fine. But the products from both leagues were better than they were last year. Obviously, the PLO, it's its first year, but it, has probably given us the best model of what professional lacrosse can be on TV. They did a lot of other great things right. The MLL stepped up its game. And despite having a limited player pool and having to rely on a lot of guys that had never played professional lacrosse before, they put out a great product. This weekend was phenomenal. These games were just as exciting as many of the PLL games we saw. So I think that's my biggest point from all of this is appreciate the best summer of lacrosse that we just witnessed. Appreciate that. Let's not as fans get caught up on which league is better. You can debate it and discuss it. I'm fine with that. But let's not just keep throwing mud, at the other leagues. So I just say if you're a professional lacrosse fan, enjoy the professional lacrosse, whatever league you prefer. But let's not tear down other people's preferences So that's just my point I want to get out of this.
Yeah, no, I completely see where you're coming from. And, we've had an awesome opportunity to talk to players and staff members in both leagues, and they're both working hard to put out a great product. They are passionate about the sport they play, whether it's the PLL or MLL, and they're trying to put out the best products that they can. So I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, no, and, a lot of these players, they have different reasons for joining different leagues, I mean, a guy like Steele Stanwick coaches at Hopkins. He likes being a hometown guy, and you got to see the advantages to each league. That will get into our other discussion. We do think one's eventually going to prevail, but for right now, I just say enjoy that we have as much lacrosse as we do. Again, we were treated to 6, almost 7 sometimes games a weekend. So enjoy that. Don't get so caught up on these leagues going back and forth. But that's the end of my rant on that. But just enjoy it, guys. And that kind of brings me to another little fun thing that is 100% not going to happen, but we'd love to see an MLL PLL Super Lacrosse Bowl, as I want to call it. Will it happen? No. These leagues obviously don't like each other. Should it happen? Yes, it would be phenomenal for the sport of lacrosse. We could get almost what an AFL, NFL type of situation of football years of old, with the lacrosse right now. It would be awesome. It'd almost be a Maryland alumni game at this point, because you had so many Maryland alumni on the Bayhawks as well as the Whipsnakes. But yeah, we kind of threw it out there on social media. I know a lot of people have been talking about it. Obviously, it's not realistic. It's not going to happen, unfortunately, at least not now. But it's fun to speculate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I highly doubt it's going to happen. Neither league really recognizes the other on social media or really anything. So not going to happen, but fun idea.
I think it would be fun. It'd be tricky with, the different rules and stuff. But that's another thing I just wanted to throw in there, because I know we've had a lot of fun discussing that on social media. And who we think would win and stuff. But now we're going to get into some more serious news about, the future of professional lacrosse. But before we do that, let's take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll get back into the MLL discussion. Today's show is being brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. You can use Stitcher Premium to listen to shows ad-free, such as Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, My Favorite Murder, Wolverine the Lost Trail, or our favorite, The Fantasy Footballers. For only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year, you get access to Stitcher Originals, bonus episodes, and comedy albums. Better yet, if you go over to Stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code lacrosse today, you can get 1 month free. So head on over to Stitcher, sign up, and get your free trial today. Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great, and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. All right, so welcome back. So we are recording this right off the heels of hearing that the Dallas Rattlers are without owner Jim Davis. He has supposedly sold the team back to the league. They ceased operations temporarily while they find a new owner. Kyle Devitt with Inside Lacrosse first reported the news that they would be ceasing operations, and then Dan Arestia followed that up saying that they have found an owner. It hasn't been announced yet. The MLL just did vote on something. We don't know what. They had a meeting. It can only be assumed that they're voting on the new owner, but we haven't heard anything as of recording this podcast. What do you think about the whole situation with Jim Davis, who owns New Balance, getting out of the MLL, at least in ownership-wise?
Yeah, it was super interesting. I think we talked offline. I was texting you when the Rattlers had their pop-up sale for 75% off all their merchandise. That kind of triggered some flashing lights going off on my head of what was happening, especially when you have Jim Davis's other 3 teams folding prior to the season. It was almost like writing on the wall that he was trying to get out of the league, and I'm glad. Hopefully the news is true that there is a new owner and they'll be able to stay afloat in the Dallas area. The fans really hit it on Twitter for the Rattlers when it was announced potentially that they were folding, that they were not too pleased. So we saw what happened with the Ohio Machine fans and the fans of the launch and the Hounds. They were really bummed that their team's seasons were cut short when they folded. So hopefully this is good news that they are going to be sticking around. But honestly, with how the offseason went last year for them, having a collegiate draft for all of those teams and then folded them after the draft, I don't trust anything until news is kind of set in stone that there is another owner in place. What does this do for the New Balance sponsorship for the MLL? I'm not sure. That's something that's still going to be up in the air. Did he pull that sponsorship when he left the league, or is that going to be something that sticks around? Obviously, the MLL is probably hoping that that's the case, that they're going to hold that. Pretty interesting now that the New Balance pulled their sponsorship with Paul Rabel, like we talked about a few weeks ago, when they may not have the sponsorship in that competing league now. But I'm hoping for the best that the Rattlers, they had a rough start of the season, but ended really strong with a good group of young players. So I'm hoping for the best for them, but somewhat pessimistic at the moment with this news, just how it's been rolled out by the MLL.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see that core group of guys on the Rattlers, stay together too. It'd be disappointing, after a phenomenal run to the second half of the season for them to, have to be dispersed. But I'm actually more optimistic. I think there's probably a buyer out there, that may be interested in getting into lacrosse. We don't have any details on who that might be, but, I'm hoping that there is somebody, because, it's not good for the league for them to lose another team. It starts to get really tricky when you get down to 5 and, less than that. So, right now they're kind of in limbo, and, it's a shame too about the people working at the Rattlers organization, that it sounds like a lot of them lost their jobs. I don't know if those jobs are going to come back with a new owner or not. So, yeah, definitely we'll be monitoring the situation and keeping you posted. But I guess this kind of leads into our bigger conversation too. Now it's time we can actually talk about the PLL and the MLL, and, the future of lacrosse. Do you see a merger on the horizon? Do you see one just outlasting the other? I don't know. What do you see from the future right now? It's way too early to predict, but what is your at a glance perspective of this?
Yeah, right now I don't see a merger happening. They've been too steadfast at this point through one season. I think they're going to probably stick it out in at least another season, being separate entities, and they're going to go from there. I think the PLL, obviously, as Paul Rabel has said, they're coming out with some big news coming up soon. So keep to Twitter to see what that big news is. They're putting out content still. They're doing their thing. Hopefully the MLL can keep up with them. But they need to get their stuff together. What we need to know what the frame of the off season is going to look like for them. There's more questions than answers when it comes to the MLL right now, and I'm hoping they're going to be answered pretty soon, so we can have the discussion about what an off season looks like. I'm so excited if the MLL is still around to see what the player movement is like. What players that were in the PLL maybe weren't getting playing time move to the MLL. Is that a possibility? Vice versa for MLL to PLL. We're super excited and curious with some of the players we've talked about, like Lyle, Rob Pennell. Are they going to make the move? We just don't know. And I'd hate that to be cut short if one of these leagues is not in commission anymore after the next couple weeks. So I'm really excited to see what this offseason is like, what the college players do too. The drafts are pretty much right around the corner, and they're going to be right around each other. So it's like 4-dimensional chess, but 2 games going on at once with 2 different players playing both games. I'm really, really excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you on the whole merger thing. I don't think it will happen either, just because, yeah, I think that the ship's kind of sailed. I think Paul was willing to work with the MLL when they looked to buy him, and then when they shut the door on that idea, I think it was a little bitter. The only reason I could see a merger maybe happening is there's so much history at the MLL, and we can't forget the MLL back in 2001 was exactly where the PLL is right now. It was exciting, it was fresh, it was new. There was intense competition. It was really giving field lacrosse its due at the professional level back in 2001. And it kind of lost that at some point, and I don't know when that was, when they expanded too much and then they had to reduce, back in 2008 with the recession. But, I think PLL has kind of reignited that and taken it at another level. It's kind of brought it into the 21st century. But, yeah, I think you mentioned, too, I think a lot of fans want to see, one of these leagues prevail and the other die, and I think it's kind of premature for that. I think one will outlast the other, but again, enjoy the amount of lacrosse we have. For the players, too, they now have leverage. They didn't have that before. It's like, hey, you can either sign with the MLL or not. And now they have leverage. It's like they can, kind of finagle these contracts with either the MLL or the PLL. They can kind of be in the driver's seat when it comes to which league they choose. And I think that's getting overlooked as well. If you have a guy that comes out of college, he has good job offers, maybe just wants to play in the MLL, and I think we want to move away from that eventually because we do want this to be a professional sport and these athletes to be treated as professionals and treated as a full-time job. But, for some people, the reality is they have full-time jobs. They're coaches, they're businessmen. So, I don't know. Again, I don't think we want to get too caught up in, the politics and stuff behind the scenes with these leagues. And we should get more caught up in, like you said, the player movement, who's going to what league. That's exciting stuff. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if a merger's really on the horizon. I don't know how a merger would even work, honestly. I think I could see Paul Rabel, if the MLL did come to them saying, we'd like to merge, I could see him wanting to keep the team's history. But I think at this point, I think he wants to kind of just outlast the MLL. Again, they're a single entity model, so how do you bring in franchises? How does that work? Would these teams come in with the same rosters and then, be absorbed in the PLL and then, be absorbed into the single entity where they're operated, by the PLL? Or would they, have some teams be franchised or not? It's a tricky situation. I wouldn't see, I think the Rabels have built a pretty solid structure with the single entity, so I don't see them wanting to rock that boat, at least early on, with all the good things they have going with them. But, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be an interesting offseason. I think we're in for a real roller coaster, and, we'll be at the forefront of it. So, keep listening, keep giving us your feedback. Again, we love talking about where you think these leagues are going. Let's have some substantial conversations. Let's not just say, this league's better because of this. Let's actually talk about, what are some of these advantages to different leagues? Are there advantages to having, region-based teams? Or, should lacrosse keep going with this barnstorming model? Because it's really, worked well for the PLL this first year. So it's fun to have these discussions, and we always appreciate you guys, talking about it. But I think that brings us, kind of towards the end of our podcast. One thing we have not talked about, and it pains me to say it, but I picked the Outlaws in the championship. You picked the Bayhawks, and you end up finishing 45-36. I finished 44-37. You are our champion for the game picks. Congratulations. I don't know if you've thought about where would you like me to take you out for dinner.
This is the first week that I was ahead, and I picked a darn good week to be ahead in the standings. So we can figure out where we go out to lunch or dinner at a later point. But picked a good week to get that dub. My Bayhawks came out ahead.
Yeah, you did. And I think we talk about in lacrosse, there's a saying, the 2-goal lead is the worst lead to have. And I feel like I was riding that 2-win lead for a while and just keeping you around, letting you hang around with the picks, and you came out on top in the end. So congratulations to you. I'm looking forward to beating you in the NLL game picks. That'll be more fun too with all the teams that are playing in the NLL this year. But yeah, that was fun. We had a lot of fun. You couldn't have asked for a better competition between us, and to come down to the final weekend was pretty fun. So yeah, we had a great time. That kind of wraps up our summer of field lacrosse coverage, but we're going to keep going in this off season. We have NLL coverage coming up. We're going to be continuing, full steam ahead with our interviews throughout the off season. We have Andrew Q, who scored that game-winning goal for the Bayhawks, coming up with us next week. We're going to be talking the PLL off season. We have a lot of ideas that we've talked about with you guys on social media. We're going to kind of put that into one big podcast, and so now's a good time for you guys to give us your feedback. We are now on Flick, which is a new podcast platform. They create groups for your podcast, and not only can you stream our podcast on this platform called Flick, but you can actually ask us questions and interact with us. We're going to be on there. We put up a question like, what guests do you guys want to have on our podcast in the future? What guests would you like to see? We've gotten some people that they want Rob Pinnell and Casey Powell. We were happy to say we're in contact with those guys. We haven't scheduled anything yet, but, they are going to be on our podcast in the future. And, that's in part for you guys suggesting those guys. So we have a lot of plans to kind of really use this Flick platform. It's relatively new. So feel free to jump on that. Another thing that we will be doing in the month of October into November is we are going to have a Lackstash Madness team for Headstrong Foundation. The Headstrong Foundation, if you're not familiar, provides a lot of support to families that are going through cancer. Nick Calalori was a lacrosse player at Hofstra who tragically passed away from his battle with cancer, and the Calalori family started Headstrong to kind of provide resources to families that are suffering from cancer. They have Nick's House, which is a house where families can go when their loved ones are experiencing treatment. And, they provide that resources. They help with travel expenses. They help, just provide that support system for families going through cancer. So we can't think of a better foundation for us to support. So we're going to have a team. We'll be raising money. We'll be growing out our mustaches, too, and see who has the best mustache by the end of this. And, all for a good cause. So we have plans to talk to Pat Calalori, who is brothers with Nick, and he's going to talk to us about not only their foundation, but Nick, too, because a lot of people don't realize Nick was a phenomenal lacrosse player. He probably would have been on our podcast, honestly, if he'd been alive today. So we're really looking forward to talking to Pat about their foundation. So that's one of the biggest things, we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited to tag team with the Headstrong Foundation. I'm a Delco guy. The Calaloris are Delco guys. I couldn't be more excited to raise more awareness for the Headstrong Foundation coming up this off season.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of exciting things going on this off season for us. Again, stick with us. We are going to be bringing you lots of interviews, even more off season discussions. We can't wait for the NLL, to cover that. So we're really excited, and we hope you guys are too. Keep giving us your feedback. Keep leaving reviews on our podcast page on Apple or Stitcher. We love hearing from you guys, and we're excited, for where we're going to take this podcast in the future. But that wraps up episode 31. Thank you all for listening, and we hope you tune in next time to Pro Lacrosse Talk.